Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Dreadbox. Telepathy. Telepathy is a full and complete synthesizer voice in a tiny little module. An entire synthesizer in here. You could see it as a Mother 32, that sort of size synthesizer, squished down, compacted and layered into this form factor. It's an analog VCO, an analog VCF, all tied together with envelopes, with noise sub oscillators, LFOs and modulation, and all of it available and accessible through a couple of buttons and 4 sliders. Can you really get a synth this small? Is it really going to be usable? I mean, those are the questions that Telepathy throws up immediately. Can you actually get in there and tweak and enjoy playing around in this synthesizer? This is what we're going to look at right now. Now, I've been working with this for quite a while now, and I think I've unearthed what it is that's special about it. It has its struggles, of course, because the interface is only going to get you so far. You've got shift functions, you've got layering, you've got the possibility of getting completely lost within the menu and forgetting what you're doing and doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. Yes, there is all of that. But also within here is a couple of nice little features that might tip you over the edge into thinking about, is this for you? Because this isn't going to be for everyone. Some people need everything laid out. I prefer to have access to absolutely everything that I need right on a knob if I can. Ideally, that's what I want. That's not always possible, and compromises have to be made when you're talking about space and you're talking about budget and you're trying to get something to work within the context of your Eurorack case. All of those things are factors. And this has a couple of things that really makes it stand out. Perhaps not as your only thing. I mean, if you've got a tiny system, a really small system, and you're looking to maximize your HP and space within a small case, then this perhaps could be phenomenal. But if you've got a larger system and you just want something which is going to be an entire voice by itself, that you don't have to worry about, that you can set up and leave and bring it in and out when you need that new texture, then that is another reason why this could be a good choice for you. But hey, we're going to spend some time, going to look at it, check out the waveforms, check out how it sounds, check out how we interact with it, how good and feasible that is. And then we're going to do something quite remarkable. We're going to stick it into a case with a whole bunch of other ones, like this, and turn it into a flippin' polyphonic synthesizer, because that's what it can become. A great, lush sounding, quirky, different, and potentially awesome polyphonic synthesizer. So that's what we're going to get to. But we'll start off with the simple stuff. We'll start off with the one and we'll just see how that goes. The other thing to point out is that it's very, 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 very compatible with MIDI. It likes MIDI. Has CV and gate also, but MIDI is really, will find where a lot of its specialness can reside. That's not always going to be for everyone within a Eurorack system where you're more familiar with CV and gate going around the place. But if you were to introduce some MIDI to it, which I'll show you, that really does bring it out of itself into becoming much more of a hardware experience. So that's interesting. And there's one other thing which is quite special, which I'll tell you about when we get there, that I think is perhaps the thing that really nails it for Telepathy. All right, let's have a look. Telepathy then. A full synthesizer voice with a VCO, a VCF, a VCA, LFO, couple of envelopes, noise, sub-oscillator, and that kind of stuff. That sort of stuff that we're familiar with, that you would find within any analog synthesizer voice. It's all sort of digitally controlled through this crazy 4-slider interface and a couple of buttons. It's easier than it appears, and it does start to reveal itself over time. I've been playing with it for quite a bit now, so I've kind of got the hang of it, and I very rarely make completely stupid errors, although it does happen. So the interface works like this. You've got 2 buttons. Left hand side is the voice, this is the menu or utilities. Let's focus on the voice at the moment. That's what's lit. You've then got 4 rows. At the top you've got LFO, then you've got the VCO, you've got the filter, and envelopes at the bottom. Everything else, like modulation level, is folded in through kind of a shift system using this button. And similarly with the utilities, you can click through save, load, allocating the CV input, setting C control, that kind of thing. But let's focus for the moment on the voice. Now we can't hear anything because it needs to be gated in order to create a sound. However, it does also have a drone mode. Now to get to that is very, very simple. You just pop down to the VCA section, hold shift, push it up. There it is. See, that was easy. So you start off with a standard sawtooth wave. We go back to the VCO level, part, bit, strip. Okay, green light, VCO. Then over here, we've got the type of waveform. So it goes from sawtooth through to sawtooth with a sub, through to just the sub, through to the square wave and sub, and then pulse. Let me show that better on here if I go one down, I think. Now up even. Okay. So pulse, square and sub, just the sub, saw and sub, saw. Now you have pulse width modulation, of course you do. That's always a thing, that's always there, that's got a line. It's got a fader right for it there, which of course doesn't work once you get into sawtooth territory. Next to that is a noise generator. And this over here is pitch. Now it can be freeform pitch like this, or you can make it into a stepped pitch, which doesn't sound like anything at all until you've actually got MIDI or CV plugged in, which is then moving the pitch around. But this is essentially an octave of quantized pitch. You'll just have to take my word for it. Next layer is filter. So you've got a low pass filter, you've got a high pass filter. You have resonance, of course, which is actually mighty fierce. There is quite a bit of drop off as you boost the resonance, as it starts to go into self oscillation. But otherwise, sounds really nice. This over here is envelope amount. Obviously only relevant when we're plugging in some kind of sequence, which we'll do in a minute. The next line here is your envelopes and stuff, which again is only going to be relevant when we put in a sequence. So let's just look at modulation to start with. This top row, the LFO, gives us the ability to put it directly into the pitch or the cutoff here. There's also different sorts of LFO. So this is your triangle. You then got your ramp in one direction or another. There you go, there's a ramp going the other way. There's your square. And then random. If we introduce that to the filter on this fader, be a bit more obvious maybe. Like so. You can also direct the LFO to different things. For instance, if I go back to the VCO row, I can hold shift, which is holding the button, and push up the waveform slider, and it'll throw the LFO at the waveform. It's only one LFO inside, so everything is following the same sort of thing, but instead we could bring in an LFO from outside and plug that into the CV in here at the top. Now to allocate that, we have to go down to, let me first of all remove the modulation from the filter. I'm then going to go on this side, I'm going to go to CV in, which is the third level here, the blue light, and for that I just select what I want to modulate. So in this case I'm on the third line for the filter, blue light here. I can push that up and then we'll be getting modulation from an external source. And that can be allocated to absolutely any parameter that you can access in the voice mode. So that's pretty versatile for any kind of external modulation. Well, let's plug a sequence in, shall we? See, what's happened here is that I got myself a little bit confused with the buttons and accidentally moved things and assigned the modulation to different things within the synth voice, so now it's gone a little bit sort of nuts. A nice nuts though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the sort of the patch, the initial patch, the initialization patch, which you can do very quickly. And there she is. Alright, let's go back and change a few things. So it starts off with just a sawtooth, then let's develop it from there. So if I go down to the envelope side of things, I've got three different sorts of envelopes. I've got your standard envelope at the bottom, which is like a decay envelope, so straight in and then decays out. In the middle it's got an up and down, which we're not going to get until we plug a keyboard in, I shouldn't think. So it goes up and down, and this one is just up. There you go. And then this acts as decay. For the filter, same idea. You've got three different modes of envelope and then the decay there. So I come down to the filter, put that in a little bit, give it some welly, put on an envelope amount, and it's all good. Now as you move around, of course, these sliders no longer mean anything. You know, I've adjusted something here for the envelope. Then if I go round to the filter, this is nothing to do with where the cutoff is, and so you get this jump where as soon as you move it, it catches up. There's no like soft pickup or anything like that. It just leaps to it, which is, I don't know, there's two schools of thought on that. Is it ideal? I don't know necessarily. But you know, it is what it is. Add a little bit of modulation to the filter. Add a bit of modulation to the wave shape. Stick it through some effects. That, I think, is pretty darn lovely. There's nothing wrong in there at all. The Telepathy produces a gorgeous analogue tone that's completely playable, completely accessible, modulatable, all within the context of its own tiny little front panel, crazy 4 sliders and a couple of buttons. You know, is it the same as having a full synth laid out in front of you? No, of course it isn't. Don't be stupid. It does have its struggles, but you could probably see as I was playing with that it wasn't difficult to navigate. Of course, I'm having to cycle through levels and menus to try to access stuff. Got to remember where I am. Got to not move a slider by accident. Things like that. But provided that you are, that you have control of your senses, then it's not a hard ask to get you to do those sorts of things. And then the reward is that you have an immense amount of versatility within this tiny space. So what should we do next? Well, we should plug a MIDI keyboard in, because using MIDI gives you a whole access to a whole load of other stuff. And we've still got the special superpower that I haven't told you about yet, which we'll get to in a minute. Right, so MIDI keyboard here, Launch Key, the new one from Novation. What's it? So let's take out the analog bits. Plug MIDI in here. It's on TRS, of course. This just happens to be the right one for this keyboard. So MIDI control, what's all that about? So essentially all I'm saying is that when you use MIDI, you can access all of the parameters within Telepathy via MIDI CC numbers that I have mapped. Well, I've mapped 16 parameters to 2 banks of these knobs here. So if I just make sure that I've got that running. So if I set up an arpeggiation, for instance, from here, then select my custom knobs. So over here I've got the filter. It actually shows it on the screen here, which is a really nice feature of the new launch key. I've been able to name them all. Got resonance, the envelope, decay of the filter envelope, then a sort of waveform, then pulse width on there. Noise level, and then actually pitch of the oscillator. I've got another page here, so then get into the LFOs. Now, one of the things that I have noticed that as I'm playing with this, that sometimes I get lost and sometimes the CCs don't work as I expect them to. But that's not always the Telepathy's fault, it's often my fault for not really understanding what I'm doing half the time. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to load up the default patch again, just to make sure that we're doing everything right. So there's the filter. If I go back to the LFO, So the point being that with MIDI, with a MIDI controller and some mapped knobs, you can access everything within Telepathy. Then it's just a matter of trying to remember where the heck you map the knobs to the thing that you map the thing to. And that means that I can control the filter, while at the same time of controlling what it is that the wave shape is doing, which I can't do physically on the front panel of the Telepathy because I'd have to be in two different pages. But now there's this secret superpower that I've spoken of. Now that is that one of the great things about Telepathy is that you can save patches and recall patches. So rather than having to explore and find a voice mid-performance, you can just select it. So the point being, I think, the point I'm trying to make is that if you have a large system and you're sculpting a sound during a performance, you could have a Telepathy up sort of out of the way, have something connected to it, whether it's a sequencer or a MIDI controller, because you can select the patches directly on the front panel here and just load in what you want, and you've instantly got another texture. You've instantly got a voice that you can bring in and play over the top or play underneath something else. So while you may be crafting sounds on the go, improvising every moment, you can then just bring in something that you actually want to happen in an instant and then swap between different sounds. So whether that's chorus and bridge and verse, or whether it's from track to track, without having to worry about it too much, without having to fuss around the place, you can just pull in that tone, and it's going to be an analog tone. It's not like it's a sample or a virtual instrument. It's a real thing. And you can always reach out on this. You don't need to have a MIDI controller. It could be completely analog. I can load up ones simply by selecting the button here. So it goes to green, the second row. I've then got two quizzical things here. One is bank and the other one is patch. So that's bank 1, patch 2, patch 3, load it in. Patch 2, load it in. Of course, having a MIDI keyboard attached gives you access to perhaps a different sort of sound. If we turn off the ARP and use just the keyboard, So there you go, that's the ins and outs of telepathy. There are other things in here like looping envelopes and other bits and pieces you can get to. There's a very handy card that comes with it to show you a lot more of the features. So for instance, under the shift, which is where you hold this and move a slider, there's lots of cool things like fading in the LFO, whether it's free tracking or BPM based. You've also got pulse width amount, noise amount. You can swap between the full range or have it semitone quantized on the pitch. You've got level of the oscillator as well. You've also got filter tracking. You've got FM amount from the noise or from the filter. And the envelope can also go to the pitch amount, so you can create percussive sounds in here and all sorts of bits and pieces. You've got sustain, envelope looping, and a drone state. So all of that is available. This is a handy thing to have around because you can't always remember what everything does. But as you start to play, these things become a little bit more natural and a bit more rememberable. Yeah? Next then, let's plug it back into the bigger case and see what we can make of this polyphony malarkey. The Telepathy bundle. Then you can get this direct from Dreadbox, 6 telepathies going into a Psychosis mixer module over here, which is a mixer which does some interesting things actually with panning of these 6 individual things going into the top. You can pan it about and make it move, which is really, really nice. It also has some built-in effects, reverb, chorus, delay, that kind of thing. So it's a cool little thing, and this transforms this one synthesizer voice into a 6-voice polyphonic synthesizer. Now it can be very much like the Oberheim 8-voice. You could see them as individual synthesizers which you can create individual voices on and then sort of play them in turn. And that's interesting. That's interesting on of itself. But what I'm going to focus on here is just playing the lot together like a polyphonic synthesizer. But, just to say, tons of versatility. Do whatever the heck you like. Have them all working together or independently. It's entirely up to you. Have it in unison if you like. But this is how you patch that together and get that to work. So I've put my last telepathy module back in over here. I need to plug the audio output into the mixer over here. Oh, there isn't a space. Why isn't there a space? What's going on here? Plug that in. Right, now we know what we're doing. Relatively speaking. Okay, they need to be set to about 12 o'clock, I think, otherwise it tends to overload the mixer a little bit. Then you've got this chain of MIDI here. So it goes MIDI out to MIDI in all the way along, and that's how all the information gets thrown across so that you can treat them as one unit. This one then becomes your master, and it's that you plug your MIDI into from your keyboard. Definitely something going on there. Right, so we need to set it up first. So let's do that. You press on menu, you hold the two together. That then goes flashy, 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 and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That should bring them all in. They're all flashing. Press voice, and it should all just kind of work. Kinda. Right, let's load up a default patch. Just to clear all the rubbish out of their little brains. There you go. Simple as that. go in onto my main one here, and I'm going to go to the envelope and put the envelope up on the filter to bring that in a little bit more. So these are the different effects from the Psychosis. So let's try some of the other presets. Now there's a little bit of a problem which has worked itself in here, which I keep encountering, so I can't ignore it sadly, which is that if I go through the individual sounds, my first one here, the one that I've been playing with, does not behave correctly. Keeps doing something else. This tends to happen when I engage a preset. And not always. Behaving itself again now. But you can see that that one is different. Yeah? Now that might well be a setting that I don't understand, that I haven't found yet, because it is a little bit complicated in how you swap modes around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill that one and go into this one to make it a 5 voice, just so that we don't have that annoyance going on. And then I'll bring this one back in a moment using analogues. You've got the two running next to each other. So I now need to change the mode on this one by pressing that, pressing those two together, so it flashes, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it should pick up the other 5. That's all lovely. So I can now use this one here to control everything else within the system. So I've got individual control over the filter. And this is affecting the filter of every voice. And of course add some other effects. So what I could try to do is to bring back in the analog sequence into this one here and see if there's any hope of getting the two to match up in terms of pitch. Telepathy then, either singularly or amongst friends in a nice big fat bundle. It's an interesting synthesizer voice. It's an analog voice. It's only trying to do the one thing. You've not got multiple sound engines or anything. It's a pure, nice, analog sounding, approachable and unwrappable synthesizer voice. It does have menu issues. It has a front panel which has the absolute ability to confuse and confuddle and befuddle you. But don't be afraid of such things. With a handy little card and a little bit of practice, you can get down and drill in to all of the parameters in there. Stick in a MIDI keyboard and you can lay it all out in front of you if you so wish to map all the controls to all the bits and pieces. It's totally accessible. It is, hidden and requires pathways and thoughts, but this is the balance and compromise that you get with a synthesizer voice in this small module. And it's kind of really up to you whether you think that's a good thing, that you can have all of that power, all of that modular stuff stuck within a small space within your rack, or whether it's just too much faff. Don't know. That really is entirely up to you. What I think is interesting is its ability, as I say, to save and load presets. So I'm kind of thinking that if I had one in my performance case, it's just an entire voice, because not everything has to be thought up and crafted on the go. Even in a patch from scratch, you can have something which you can absolutely rely on and know is going to be a particular sound to drop in at a particular point. That interests me, I think. And also the potential of taking a keyboard to a gig just to do a little bit of synthy kind of fiddling on a particular thing that I know is going to be a good sound. So I'm not wasting my time in trying to integrate something which I'm not quite sure how that's going to go, which is often the way with improvised modular. So it definitely has a place, I think. The ability to turn and transform into this rather nice polyphonic synthesizer is really an added bonus. I mean, you know, buy the whole lot, fantastic. You can use them individually all over the place or use it together. But in other ways, I think it's the sort of thing you could slowly build up. So you could buy like a pair and have a little duophonic thing going on. You could buy another one and then you've got chords going on, and you can expand slowly over time in the way that it links together. And the way it does that is relatively simple once you've wrapped your head around the way that you enable those things to happen. Or you can use it like a SEM, individual synthesizer modules, which you can have running together as a single synthesizer in unison or in voice per voice. It gives you a lot of possibilities. Yeah, the only downside is the interface, really. I mean, it's got enough quirk and character and sound and discovery as any other collection of parts put together to form a synthesizer. The thing that's going to drag you is that interface. Is that important? Is that not? You know, only you can really answer that. I found that initially it was as frustrating as heck, but over time it's been all right. I don't think it's better than having them separate. No, that would somehow be sort of crazy talk. But it is doable, it is workable, and I've had a lot of fun putting this together and putting this video together. Big thanks to Source Distribution who have lent this to me. This now has to go back, sadly, so we'll never know whether having one of these sitting in my case is a good idea or not. At least not at the moment. But I hope that my approach to this, the crazy, weird, underwhelming sound demos have been useful in some way, and I hope overall you found this to be a helpful introduction to the possibilities and my feelings about the Dreadbox Telepathy. Great! So in the meantime, go and make some tunes.